So we'll hunt him. Because he can take it. Because he's not a hero.
Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy is marked by Batman's ever-shifting reputation, transforming him from a mysterious figure in the night to hero to villain to legend and myth. It's a fitting story for a character whose cultural identity is always in flux. Batman is a far more immutable character than any of his peers, but what kind of hero is he exactly? In this video and the next one, I'm going to look at 6 heroic archetypes and parse out the many literary influences that have been melded together to form what we think about as Batman. Now, of course, when asking the question, what kind of a hero is Batman, the obvious answer is, duh, he's a superhero. But of course, the superhero didn't spring fully formed out of the minds of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, detached from every kind of character that came before. When crafting Superman, Siegel said that he based his character on Samson, Hercules, and all the strong men I've heard tell of rolled into one, only more so. Samson and Hercules are what we call classical heroes, and most superheroes are extensions of their classical predecessors. These are characters known for their strength and their ability to perform great deeds, usually monster hunting. A key feature of the classical hero, however, is that they are flawed, often foolish. Samson is overly trusting, and Hercules accidentally murders his family. In making Superman like these characters, only more so, Siegel and Shuster ironed out these imperfections. Superman's only weakness, kryptonite, is external, not internal. In Batman, we have a more human version of the classical hero, but the kinds of flaws he exhibits, especially in the Nolan trilogy, more closely align with another type of protagonist that is just as old as the classical hero, the tragic hero. Superheroes often have a tragic backstory. Dead parents, dead uncle, exploded planets. There are few characters who experience as much tragedy as Batman does, but that bad things happen to him does not necessarily qualify Batman as a tragic hero. For that, we have to turn to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, who defined the character type in his book, Poetics. The character type often overlaps with the classical hero, but the essence of what makes a character tragic, according to Aristotle, is when they cause us to feel both pity for them and fear for ourselves. Okay, so how does that happen? Well, to figure that out, Aristotle outlines a few kinds of characters that do not accomplish this. So if we watch a perfect man fail, it is not tragedy, it merely shocks us. If we watch an evil man succeed, nothing is more alien to the spirit of tragedy. If we watch an evil man fall, we will feel morally satisfied, but not pity or fear. Here's the key bit. Pity is aroused by unmerited misfortune. Fear by the misfortune of a man like ourselves. So the tragic hero should not be perfect, otherwise we won't relate to him. But he should be better than most men, more capable and more moral. Tragedy will strike only because he makes errors in judgment or because of his frailty. In other words, their downfalls have to come as a result of their own actions, and often as a result of actions they thought were morally correct, as opposed to vices. And the punishment has to be worse than the crime. Hamlet is a good example here. He's a good, clever, respected nobleman whose fatal flaw, or hamartia, is not that he contemplates murder, but that he contemplates murder for too long. Had he killed Claudius immediately, he would have avoided catastrophe. But in waiting, in attempting to make absolutely sure he was acting morally, a bunch of other people die, including himself. Nolan's version of Batman, at least in The Dark Knight, owes a bit of a debt to Hamlet, not just because they have a dead parent or two. The deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne is the most glaringly obvious tragic moment in Bruce's life, but it is just the start of his story, and tragic heroes are really defined by their endings rather than their beginnings. Now, the Aristotelian error of judgment that cements Bruce as a tragic hero happens right here. Bruce's fatal flaw is his refusal to kill, a choice that will cause the death of Rachel, Harvey Dent, and the persona of the Batman as we know it. Now, often tragic heroes like those in Shakespeare will die at the end of their stories, but not always. Oedipus, for instance, who Aristotle calls the most perfect version of the tragic hero, survives the play he is most known for and doesn't die until its sequel, Oedipus at Colonus. What's more important, and perhaps even more tragic than a physical death, is a total and complete spiritual and emotional death. That is what Bruce experiences at the end of The Dark Knight. When we are reintroduced to him in The Dark Knight Rises, he is practically a dead man, a hermit unable to enjoy life. That film is thematically a resurrection of Bruce Wayne, and in order for something to be resurrected, to rise, it has to be dead and fallen to begin with. The classical and tragic heroes are enduring and pervasive, and it's really not until the early 19th century that we start to talk about heroes in other terms, with the emergence of the romantic hero. Now, don't let the name fool you. This term does not mean the hero of a romance story. No, it comes out of Romanticism, a movement that emphasized emotion and individuality and which produced literary heroes that broke the mold of what we typically considered heroic. In contrast to classical and tragic heroes who were often characters at the center of their societies, kings, leaders, and warriors, the romantic hero is typically an outsider, a rebel, someone who is waging war on society itself, its systems of justice, its materialism, its hypocrisy, etc. The character is a reflection of the social disintegration, violence, urbanization, and upheaval that defined the 19th century as a result of the French and Industrial Revolutions. Literary critic Northrop Frye wrote that this version of the hero is someone who is placed outside the structure of civilization and therefore represents the force of physical nature, amoral or ruthless, yet with a sense of power and often of leadership that society has impoverished itself by rejecting. You can see the outline of Batman in that description. The Nolan trilogy really emphasizes that final part of the character, since Gotham is clearly a poorer place when it doesn't incorporate Bruce's ideas. In the romantic hero, those ideas come from someone who is engulfed in a sea of psychological struggles. They are moody and unpredictable. They are brooders or visionaries, the centers of intense mental activity. Who does that sound like? There is something, some idea or emotion that this character has that sets them apart from the world, and as a result of this separation, they are introspective, melancholic, and often wandering, wayward men. You can see all of these characteristics seep into the portrayal of Bruce Wayne throughout the Dark Knight trilogy, but especially in the early parts of Batman Begins, where his dissatisfaction with Gotham's systems of justice sends him adrift in the world on a journey that begins aimlessly. His return to Gotham and his subsequent war on crime mimics Edmond Dante's transformation into the Count of Monte Cristo, or Heathcliff's return to Wuthering Heights after mysteriously acquiring great wealth, and both of their battles on the people who wronged them. Note, too, that all of these characters are clever and intelligent, a necessary quality for someone who has diagnosed the world as lacking. And that's a quality that isn't as necessary for classical or tragic heroes. But there is a key characteristic that separates Batman from the romantic heroes. Batman is not misanthropic. He's altruistic, not egoistic. One of the earliest romantic heroes appears in French writer Honoré de Balzac's Père Goriot. In it, a young man named Rastignac declares war on the cruelty of Parisian society. Rainey Sanford says that the limitations of Rastignac as hero are readily apparent. The rebel who deludes himself that to plunder and exploit make him somehow different from those with whom he contends can only be an adolescent figure, without self-perception. He sees all the irrational, demonic forces in the world as outside himself, a delusion that perhaps is the most limiting quality of the typical romantic rebel. We run into a bit of a catch-22 here. The character who thinks of society as corrupt without analyzing himself will also act in an immoral manner. But if they recognize the potential damage of their own actions, they can rise above that darkness. This happens with the Count of Monte Cristo when Dantes begins to regret his relentless pursuit of revenge and redeems himself by helping others. That moment of self-revelation happens much earlier in Batman Begins, when Bruce regrets nearly killing Joe Chill himself. For the romantic hero, salvation comes not when they recognize the mutual goodness between themselves and the rest of society, but when they recognize the potential for evil in both, and thus the need not to just wage war against something, but to produce something new as well. In rejecting Ra's al Ghul, Bruce Wayne essentially rejects being a romantic hero. The quest of the Batman to rid Gotham of crime is too big and too fundamentally good to fit fully into the mold of the flawed rebel as seen in romantic literature. So we may say that in Nolan's interpretation of the character, Batman has the personality, the moodiness and darkness of a romantic hero, as well as the outsider status, but that he has a more traditionally heroic set of values. At the same time, he accomplishes great feats of strength like a classical hero and faces terrible consequences for his errors in judgment like a tragic hero. But we're not done yet. In part 2, we'll dive into other archetypes of heroism in literature and take a look at how they're used in some of Batman's comic book portrayals. Until then, thanks for watching. This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is an excellent all-in-one platform to build your website or online store. It's really easy to use and there's nothing to install, patch, or upgrade. I made my website, justrightmedia.com, with Squarespace, and I got it to look exactly the way I wanted it to in very little time. So it's the perfect option if you're someone who's always on the go and doesn't have any coding experience, like myself. So whether you're a writer that needs a professional website or someone that wants to start blogging or any other reason, start your free trial today by going to squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/justright to get 10% off your first purchase. If you want to get more of my thoughts on writing and pop culture, follow me on Twitter @SageHayden. And as always, many thanks to my patrons on Patreon for supporting this channel. If you want to help me keep making these videos, then head over to patreon.com/justright and you can pitch in as little as $1 a video to help keep me going. Every dollar counts and helps ensure that I can devote the most amount of time possible to these videos and hopefully keep making them better. I'll see you soon for part 2. Keep writing, everyone.